there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world. Ajde, majkata!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
In a stinging rebuke to their favorites in the region, the U.S. State Department and its ambassadors, the EU foreign policy apparatus, and even fanboy U.S. Senator Chris Murphy all publicly criticized Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti during a recent flare-up in the north of Kosovo. Many of Kosovo's supporters, mostly folks on the left, were visibly upset and shaken that their primary supporters, the U.S. foreign policy mandarins, would publicly rebuke their puppets in Kosovo, many of them taking to the Twittersphere to decry the, quote, betrayal, unquote, with one, apparently, I think, Albanian, crying, quote, the first U.S. administration to have cheated and betrayed like only KGB Russia only does, unquote. Wah, wah. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin in Skopje, Macedonia, uncomfortably close to Kosovo, as we all know.
Well, just to, let's say, to borrow a phrase from the corporate world, just to level set here. I don't know how many of our listeners know. I've got a very, very, very long relationship with the Balkans. Actually, my last column was celebrating 27 years with Macedonia, but I first got involved in the Balkans in 1992.
It was 1995, and we all wore white hats.
Exactly, 1992. So it was Kosovo that brought me to Macedonia, working for a humanitarian group, Mercy Corps, based out of Portland, Oregon. I was there for 3 months. I was in Macedonia, but working in Kosovo for 3 months in '96, and then of course stayed for 7 years, etc. But even then, this is my great sin that I have to forever walk the earth in repentance for having worked for a PR lobby firm. I wasn't the lobbyist; I was the PR guy that worked with Dr. Rogova and the LDK in supporting Kosovo independence in the
at least it was not the Uchaka.
Yeah, of course not. No, this was these were the peaceful people. So, I remember many dinners and lunches with Rogova. But we would, we'd bring members of the U.S. Congress over to Kosovo, and the entire narrative, and from the State Department as well at that point, was good Albanian, bad Serb.
Yeah.
And that's been the narrative for a very long time in the region. In Macedonia, of course, it is bad Macedonian if Macedonian is a rightist, good Macedonian if good Macedonian is a leftist and bows to Dewey. But in Kosovo, so I've been around for a long time. Oh dear, I'm losing it. What was I going to say? So, and for some of our listeners, they may not remember, although I think most of our listeners would. So, NATO fought a very defensive, I'm using air quotes here, very defensive war against Serbia in 1999, de facto air force of the Uchaka. And then, it was UN Resolution 1244 that kicked in. And then all of a sudden, one day in February in 2008, Kosovo declared independence, and presto, everybody, a lot of countries, accepted that as, yes, they could be, even though UN Resolution 1244 said nothing of the sort. Eventually, I think the International Court of Justice ruled in favor of Kosovo, but let's not forget that the International Court of Justice also ruled in favor of Macedonia on the Greece dispute, proving that, I think this is a paraphrase of Voltaire, maybe as one of the other French philosophers, proving that the International Court of Justice is neither international in scope, nor court, nor just. So many, and this is the frustrating thing, Cvetin, because so many people point to, so Vladimir Putin has used Kosovo as his justification for invading Crimea and taking over.
He's
not wrong.
Like, formally, he did that? I don't really remember.
He's hinted at it. Yeah, he's hinted at it. So he's not wrong. I mean, the thing is, Kosovo.
Yeah,
I mean,
he did. Yeah, the Serbs were salty about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love this. I love here just to pluck one sentence out of the mainstream media. Here's a Reuters article recently. Quote, Kosovo declared independence in 2008, almost a decade after the guerrilla uprising brought an end to repressive Serbian rule, unquote. Well, number one, it's much more complicated than that. And they should not have declared independence. I mean, they're still not technically recognized as an independent nation state by the United Nations and others, etc. But the thing is that we want to talk about or start with here is this whole idea that they are the quote-unquote teacher's pet, so to speak.
Yeah.
Amongst
there have been some changes in this regard recently.
Yes. So this what precipitated this, and the point of this podcast, I think this is 156 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, recording on Monday, June the 5th, 2023, was this flare-up in the north part of Kosovo, north part of North Mitrovica, I guess, where they had the Kosovo government had local elections for mayors. The Serbs boycotted. The ethnic Albanians were elected mayors with the tiniest percentage of votes, 3%, something like that, which then precipitated these riots. Kosovo troops were injured, media, etc. And now the collective West is dumping on Albin Kurti, saying you ignored our advice. You shouldn't have held these elections. Now we're going to sanction you on all these levels. And then our friends mostly on the left are crying. Here's Toby Vogel. I think we've had some run-ins with him, Cvetin, you and me. He says, canceling Kosovo's participation in Defender 23 is a really grown-up way to register disagreement. The sort of thing I'd expect from Grenell, not the Biden administration. Grenell referring to Richard Grenell and the Trump administration. So you can find these quotes all over the place. Yeah.
Daniel, what was his name? He was very angry. Dan Server, he was very angry at this.
Here's Senator Chris Murphy, fanboy Chris Murphy. I am a good friend of Kosovo, but I reiterated my belief that Kosovo must de-escalate the situation in northern Kosovo or risk the possibility of losing congressional support. That's not nothing, as our British friends would say. So.
Yeah, for example, Murphy has always been known for the large Albanian community in Connecticut, which he likes to represent, and he's always been a very strong supporter of the Albanians. So for him to come out in this way, accusing Kosovo of provoking the Serbs, this is really unheard of. We haven't seen these people talk this way about the Albanians ever.
Well, exactly. Except now, okay, I'm gonna blast from the past here, and I got to write about this. Before me, I am reading from the Committee on Foreign Relations, United States Senate, 107th Congress, first session, June 13, 2001. So this is now the late Senator Jesse Helms, peace be upon him, was the chairman of the committee at that time. And this is when Pardue was around. Remember him?
Okay.
So this is a committee. This is the Committee of Foreign Affairs of the United States Senate in 2001. This is during the middle, just to set the stage. This is during the middle of the war that Ali Ahmeti started in Macedonia. Yeah. And here is Senator Helms is asking James Pardue, Ambassador Pardue at the time, what was the reason for this flare-up. And Pardue says, the Macedonian government was working in an ongoing dialogue with the Albanian community at this time this fighting broke out. That process was not moving rapidly enough in either our view or the view of the Albanian community. I think this conflict has heightened the awareness that the government needs to make actions. So Pardue basically said there that the Macedonian government realized there were some inequities, inequalities to pluck words from today, but they were in a dialogue, and then the Albanians, led by Ali Ahmeti, basically started a war to get, quote unquote, the rights. Although Ali Ahmeti said that they were fighting a war to remove Slavs from the territory, but that was his first month, and then he changed his tune. So,
But these would be very rare cases where American diplomats would say that the Albanians were wrong, and then even if they would say this from time to time, there would be zero follow-up to this.
Right.
They would never take the side of non-Albanian of somebody else against the Albanians.
Yeah. Now, but this next is great. So this is Senator Torricelli. I think he was New Jersey. So he says, "Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Helms." And then Senator Torricelli asks Ambassador Pardue. He says, "Ambassador, looking at this historically from the perspective of 20 years forward." So this is in 2001. So that would be now. Okay. From the perspective of 20 years forward, will people be harsh with the United States that our policies in Kosovo and Serbia generally participated in raising unrealistically Albanian expectations, which unwittingly and unfortunately may further fueled the problems?
Interesting.
It is fascinating. So, and then Pardue answers, and then Torricelli comes back. "I'm not disputing that. My question is on the perception of Albanians who have unfortunately now given themselves to violence and terrorist operations. Could it be argued out of the current context that they have the unfortunate misplaced perception that this was an opportunity for them?"
Well,
interesting.
Misplaced. It was a very well-placed perception that they have a great opportunity, but for the first time ever now in the past few weeks, we see that it might cost them. It might come at a cost if all these comments we're hearing about Kosovo are now suddenly sincere. Because what happened was that there was a deal made between Serbia and Kosovo in which the U.S. pushed very strong on Kosovo to accept the terms of the deal, which includes that a very small portion of their territory, rural, not very densely populated, geographically compact northern corner of the country, which has 4 municipalities, 3 rural municipalities, and the north of Mitrovica, northern half of the city, are formed into a association of Serbian majority communities with some practical matters of local self-government in which they can cooperate, like education and stuff. But obviously the Kosovars know very well that seeing how this worked out in Bosnia, that the Serbs created practically their own state on half the territory of Bosnia, they fear that this small piece of Kosovo may eventually secede, and this will be like a consolation prize for Serbia if Serbia is forced to recognize the independence of Kosovo in the future, or this will be a frozen conflict, something that Serbia will dangle over them, maybe deploy its own troops there after a few years during some crisis, and so on. So the Albanians who gained the territory of Kosovo through secession, armed secession, now fear that they will have a repeat of armed secession on a very small piece of their territory. But more than the territory, it's the possibility that this will cause war between Albanians and Serbs again. Mm-hmm. What the American diplomats who support this deal, and they come in all shapes and sizes, including the Trump administration, which was very close to a deal like this during this famous Trump summit between, Vučić and Taci. Taci was charged mid-flight. Mm-hmm. So the idea was that this was going to include dividing Kosovo, a partition of Kosovo in exchange for Serbia accepting it in some form, that it's some kind of an independent country. It was wildly reported that former EU diplomatic chief Mogherini was also behind this deal, that the Commission in general, the European Commission in general, was in favor of this. Then Merkel had to intervene to stop this deal on her end. So this is not a new proposal. So this was supported by the Trumps for a while. And then now it's apparently supported by the current American ambassador in Belgrade, Chris Hill, who is very experienced regional hand and who is apparently having some idea of a grand deal with Serbia that would not so much aimed to recognize Kosovo, but more aimed to bring Serbia to the Western camp, to have Serbia cut its ties with Russia, close the Russian kind of like a military base in Serbia, stop relying on Russian security guarantees, supporting the United Nations, stop the favorable trade regimen with Russia in gas and Serbian industrial and agricultural exports, and become a good, loyal NATO soldier in the Balkans.
Right. Although I think it is.
Yeah.
No, I think it's Serbia's policy under the current government, Vučić, to not join NATO.
Oh yeah, sure. But become a good Western.
Yeah.
Maybe partnership for peace and aligning its foreign policy with the EU, maybe be rewarded with some steps toward joining the EU in exchange for all this. But it's a huge, we've discussed this a couple of times in this podcast. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I suppose that the deal looks like this. You're going to get, you have to recognize Kosovo, allow it to join the Council of Europe, maybe the United Nations, even though it's difficult with Serbia, with Russia and China. Then it may be allowed to join NATO, who knows, in the future. But in any case, just relinquish any idea of control over the rest of Kosovo, other than this small piece at the north. And also lose your sovereignty, lose your chance to pick your global protectors and global alliances. And in exchange, you will get the West to stop interfering in Serbian politics and Serbian interests in Bosnia. So practically you get half of Bosnia under Serbian control. You will get, Serbia would get influence in Montenegro. Much of the country is, people there identify as Serbs, so maybe this would mean even access to the sea coast again, which was denied Serbia after the Kosovo War and the secession of Montenegro. It would probably get controlling stake or significant influence in the eastern part of Macedonia, which is no longer independent, sovereign decision-making subject in the Balkans. It's now on the menu. It's up for grabs between Albanians and somebody else. And this is the carrot for Serbia. The stick for Serbia, if it refuses this plan and if it continues to ally itself with Russia, is probably that the United States will continue the colored revolution treatment of Serbia, continue funding and instigating protests, supporting the opposition against Serbian President Vučić, which is now holding massive protests after this horrific school shooting in Belgrade. And the speed with which this shooting turned into massive political protests is also raising a lot of eyebrows. I'm going to stop commenting at that. Then the threat would probably be that in Kosovo, the Serbs will see something that was happening this past during this incident, would see deployment of Kosovo army and police into the north of Kosovo, intimidating, expelling Serbs. This is something that Serbia would have to react militarily if it wants to stop this. And if the United States stands with Kosovo in this deal, in this situation, then Serbia would have very difficult time doing this, protecting its own people from the Albanians in Kosovo. It would be told that maybe even the Serbs in strategic parts in Bosnia, like the Brčko city, which connects the two parts of two Serbian parts of of Bosnia could be under some pressure from the Bosniaks. And it's not that unimaginable in Europe now that if you side with Russia, that you will be attacked, and that as a nation, like Russian minorities, like for example in Moldova, the Russians living there, and that nobody will come to help you. There will be nobody in Europe will stand with you. It's not very unimaginable that Serbs in Bosnia or whatever remains in Croatia, if things go bad, that Vučić, that the Serbian government could be pressured with attacks on their people in the region, and them being told that they cannot intervene and help them. There is a large Muslim area in Serbia remaining there, Sanjak. Serbia could face insurgency there. So these are all the threats that I'm sure Ambassador Hill is making at Vučić when they're discussing this proposal, which has been, it's not just my imagining this, it's something that Serbian politicians, journalists have said is what they're being offered at the moment. Mm-hmm. And importantly for the title of this podcast is that Serbia is probably promised this control of Macedonia, of the eastern part of Macedonia, while obviously the Albanians will have controlling stake on the western part of Macedonia. But if the Serbs do not agree to the plan, they would. Bulgaria is here for sloppy seconds. They would very much like to have this chance to become the controlling influence in the eastern part of North Macedonia.
Now, talk about directions there. Geographical directions. So, just to be clear, when you say controlling, you mean influence. You said influence there as well, too. You didn't mean...
It doesn't have to be hard.
They're not going to be
immediately.
Fascist occupiers like the Bulgarians were during World War II.
It doesn't mean immediately dividing the country, but it would mean business, intelligence, politics, culture, etc. And Serbia already has a lot of cultural and economic and influence in terms of security services over Macedonia, with all the, us going back so long in Yugoslavia and so on. This would not take much for Serbia to even formally assume the role of protector of Macedonians, of the Christian Slavic part of Macedonia.
Well, I think you're pretty much spot on in that. I might quibble on the margins with you on some of those things, but if leaders in Cvetin and Macedonia, or even just rank and file, or even regional, they don't need to be at the national level, but cities and whatnot, if they finally stood up for Macedonian interests, I don't think you would be faced with this. The problem is that the rank and file of Cvetin have acquiesced or given up, or they're just lethargic or whatever in terms of defending Macedonian interests, and have given everything over to the leadership of Cvetin, which has in turn handed that over to Prime Minister Artan Grubi. And that's Macedonia is not unique in that case. I think other countries have similar situations like this. So, but for Macedonia, which has been threatened for a long time and is still under threat, its identity, etc. All we can do is encourage and talk about these things and raise these points.
Citizens are psychologically incapable of standing up for themselves and for our country. They can stand up for their personal interests. Like they would follow the line of whoever is in charge in the Balkans at the moment, and they will ask just to be allowed to remain in power and some personal business interests, stuff like that, to be allowed to be corrupt without too much interference. They were like this in Yugoslavia. They were the loyal servants of Belgrade. They have proven very capable of adapting themselves to now the American-led, American-run Balkans by promising offering to be the good, loyal soldiers of Washington in the region, even if it means that we have to accept and do the bidding of Albanians in the country, implement everything they want. Then the Greeks, now the Bulgarian demands, they just don't have the sovereignty gene in themselves. They're just lackeys.
Yeah, that's too bad. Well, yeah, again, SUDSM, to use the full acronym, were the League of Communists of Macedonia before 1991.
Yeah.
So, and Ali Ahmeti, of course, is a Marxist-Leninist. Probably slightly reformed from that, but more of just a freelance thug and criminal. So, and Albin Kurti, to go back to Kosovo, is I think it's important to remember so Kurti voted in the elections in the Republic of Albania, as well as elections in Kosovo. So, which is bizarre. You can't do that.
So it's dual citizenship, you mean?
Dual citizenship, yeah. And
yeah, I'm sure he does.
Yeah, and well, I remember him. He was criticized by a lot of people for voting in Albania. He's the prime minister of Kosovo, and he's voting in Albania.
Yeah.
This is kind of, wait a second, which it doesn't do much to dampen the still talk from now and then of about Greater Albania.
Well, maybe he wanted to vote for the Berisha party there in Albania because, this is the other very interesting development. Never mind that for the first time ever American diplomats are criticizing Kosovo. We have Albania criticizing Kosovo a lot. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama is extremely critical of Kurti. He's openly supportive of the other parties in Albania, the Taci party, especially the Haradinaj party, to come back, take over, and continue. They're accusing, Albanians are accusing Albin Kurti of this unprecedented undermining of the Kosovo relationship with the American diplomatic corps. And they say that the country obviously cannot survive long if it's not on good footing with the Americans.
Yeah.
Now, the other end of this coin is that if Serbia gets controlling stake over the north of Kosovo and Bosnia and Montenegro, seems that the other part of this arrangement is that Albania gets controlling stake of Kosovo, of most of Kosovo, and obviously of Western Macedonia. So Albin Kurti is now practically the sovereignist politician, sovereignist power in Kosovo, while Edi Rama wants to undermine him. Edi Rama wants to do away with him and practically roll Kosovo into a greater Albania. This is what... so not only Serbia stands to gain from this, but Serbia's loss in terms of giving up Kosovo will not be toward Kosovo's sovereignty, but actually toward a greater Albania. We have discussed also this a lot in this podcast because it's part of this inexplicable project of Open Balkan, which was strongly supported by some American diplomats, criticized by others, and strongly supported by the young Soros.
Who was just in the region, so again.
Yeah, he's always here.
Yeah. So.
That we bring Serbia and Albania together for some reason into a economic union, and then bring Kosovo and Bosnia and Montenegro. And Macedonia is the only country of these smaller countries which are on the menu, which are not invited to the dinner, but are part of the menu, which agreed to this project. Under Zoran Zaev, we agreed to be part of this deal, even though both Bosnians, Montenegrins, and especially Kosovars were saying this is crazy, this is going to end badly for all of us, why would we integrate with Serbia? What are we doing here? And we would all be put in a type of an economic union, a Schengen, free travel, free movement, no work permit regime in the Balkans. But then within this, probably it's imagined that this would be a convenient vehicle for the future which I described, to have Serbian and Albanian companies, politicians, security services, etc., partition the Muslim and the Orthodox parts of the Balkans, between themselves, entrench their influence beyond their borders of Serbia and Albania. And then at an opportune moment, this soft partition will be made actual partition.
This is let's go back 22 years ago this very month to that foreign policy hearing I was just quoting from. Again, this is Senator Torricelli asking Ambassador James Pardue some questions, and so Torricelli says, sometimes in this country, meaning the United States, sometimes in this country in deciding policies, the repercussions of them, the opportunities for the parties involved to misinterpret and miscalculate are enormous. So he's talking about, this is a hearing on Macedonia, this is the in LA, mistakenly or not, looking at policies emanating from Washington, D.C., and thinking, Washington supports us, the NLA, in our actions. Torricelli, the chairman, Senator Helms, the chairman asked you to define if there was a unifying set of objectives in the KLA. This is the. Now he's talking about. He says KLA here. It must have been the NLA. To the extent that they exist, the unifying objectives, and you are to impose them on a map of region, could you describe what that would look like, Ambassador Pardue? For those extremists in the Albanian community that believe in a greater Albania, it includes all the territory where Albanians live, and that includes southern Serbia, part of Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, and, Senator Torricelli interjects, I take it almost all of Kosovo and parts of southern Serbia. And define for me how much of Macedonia would be in that, Ambassador Pardue. Well, probably the northern, at least third, maybe more. But when you get very large pockets of Albanian citizens inside of Macedonia, which is a falsity, they're not Albanian citizens, they're Macedonian citizens. For example, the capital of Skopje alone has probably 200,000 Albanians that live there. So this is the problem with all these proposers to draw lines on these maps. There is no clean line that, Senator Torricelli. Well, if we are sitting in the KLA, he means NLA, headquarters, and every headquarters has a map on the wall to rally their forces, their map would include Kosovo, southern Serbia, at least the northwest of Macedonia, and potential some non-contiguous areas in Macedonia. Ambassador Pardue. Probably in the minds of some. I doubt that these guys have thought through it that far, and they certainly did not succeed in southern Serbia.
They have thought through it. That's all they think about.
Yes, I know. Well, Ambassador Pardue is finally paying for his sentence because he is dead and buried 6 feet underground and probably in hell. But again, this just points to a couple of things we've been talking about through our talk here this morning, your afternoon. Of number one, the narrative has been from Washington, from the State Department, and largely in concert with the European Union. The narrative has been good Albanians, everybody else is bad, and the ethnic Albanians in the region, whether they were in Kosovo or Macedonia, in Kosovo in '99 or even before, or Macedonia 2001 or today, have said, Washington supports us, we can do no wrong, let's just grab the guns and go for it. And now they're getting some pushback, blowback, which is kind of certainly unsettled some of our friends on the left, who, the fanboys that think that have bought into the narrative that Albanians are good, everybody else bad. So, and it's just something that, how do you get out of this? I don't know. You made some interesting points about what the end goal might be with getting rid of Kurti and getting Vučić to come back into the quote unquote Western camp, but we'll see.
Yeah, do you have a theory why was the United States so eager to support Albanians and for so long? I mean, okay, you said that, for example, you were at some point hired in this. What was there like where was this coming from? How did this become such a strong cause for American foreign policy?
I have grappled with that question for over a quarter of a century, and I'm not sure. I mean, so you trace it back to the breakup of Yugoslavia. So you had Slovenia got off with the 10-day war, Croatia their war with Serbia, Montenegro, what was rump Yugoslavia at the time, a little bit longer. Bosnia, of course, was the really bloody one. And the Bosnians were largely, Bosniaks were largely Muslim. Now, this is 1992 to 1995, roughly, when Hillary Clinton flew into Bosnia and came under sniper fire. Lie. So long before 2001, when everything changed, and the United States, I think, actively tried to show Muslims around the world that we're their friends, etc. So I don't know if it's a religious thing, but with the Albanians, I've just never been able to get my head wrapped around it. I haven't got a good answer for you on that.
No.
And
I don't deny, obviously, that the Serbs did horrible crimes in Bosnia, and that Kosovo was largely their fault. Even though, we had a lot of... it's not picnic living with a growing Muslim population in Kosovo for the Christian people there. I mean, we know this from experience in Macedonia, but of course the Serbs had the military, had the police, and the violence was coming, they had the responsibility to maintain law and order in this territory. They should have done this politically, they should have done this with demographic policies, with development policies, different way.
Sure.
But, obviously Serbs did horrible things and they had to be stopped. But to have this conversation in 2023, and that until now, Kosovo, the Albanians were undisputed darlings of the U.S. foreign policy establishment from both parties. We had politicians from the Republican Party. It's not only the Clintons. It's not just the Albrights. That the U.S. would take their side, even over the side of sympathetic other nations, when the Albanians were obviously in the wrong, such in the case of Macedonia in 2001, and again in 2015 when we were again attacked from Kosovo, and nobody was held responsible in Kosovo over this by the Americans. In fact, we pretty much understand that the U.S. was looking favorably at the Kumanov attack as it was trying to bring down Gruevski, if not directly phoning in, calling them and telling them do something. It's easy for an Albanian to get a delusion of grandeur if the U.S. is so without discrimination on their side. Now we would have theories like, well, they're buying American diplomats with drugs, with organs for sale. They are. Or
it could be, I always like to make a comparison between, say, the Albanian mafia and the Russian mafia. The Russian mafia will just kill you. The Albanian mafia will kill you, cut off your head, and send it to your mother. So they're in some ways they're much more fearsome, or at least they portray themselves as much more fearsome. There's that. There's the Huntingtonian view of the clash of civilizations. And the fault lines between Muslim East and Orthodox Christian West. And you go back just 120, 140 years, and you look at the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, and the various European powers were often feuding more with themselves than with Turkey or the Ottoman Empire back then. And, they were siding with them. Why? I don't know exactly. But I wanted to go back to your point about, yes, the Serbs committed horrible atrocities in Bosnia and in Kosovo. But the other issue, you have to kind of go back to the origins of the KLA, the UÇK, the so-called Kosovo Liberation Army, and that they were running around. So they were tired of Rugova's peaceful efforts to try and get independence, or at least more autonomy, because it had been revoked, I think, in '89 by Milosevic. Oh yeah, June 28, 1989, Battle of Kosovo Polje. So the so-called KLA was running around the territory of Kosovo. So this is, part of rump Yugoslavia. And they were declaring, they would do attacks on Serbian police or military, and then they would declare this to be free territory. Now, no country in the world is going to allow that to happen. You can't just run around and kill, members of the armed forces or police, interior ministry or whatever, and then declare. So there were two problems. The Serbs would come in with overwhelming force, and then number two, the Albanians would cluster in homes at places with their women and children. Now, I'm not suggesting that is a Muslim thing, because women and children aren't as valued in Muslim culture, could be perhaps, I think I'm going to get some blowback from some people we know on that statement, but that's okay. I believe it. And so, the women and children were then killed. I mean, the patron saint of the KLA is, what's his name, Adam Yashari.
Yeah.
So, disproportional. But there's plenty of blame to go around. I mean, there were lots of Serbs, Roma, even ethnic Albanians in Kosovo that were considered collaborators with the Serbs were killed by the KLA during and after, especially after the war was over, after the Kumanovo Agreement in June of 2001. So, there's plenty of blame to go around. It could have been worked out differently. It didn't. And yes, so the Albanians became the darlings. But now maybe something's changing. I don't know. I think we're not gonna come to any conclusions in this podcast or this year. It's going to continue to unfold, and we'll see. So Escobar, Gabriel Escobar, and his European counterpart, I think, are in Kosovo today. Again, this is Monday, June 5, and trying to knock heads together, I guess. So we'll see what comes. I think. Yeah, I think Kurti has pledged to withdraw the mayors and hold early elections.
Yeah, that's the simple answer. They obviously do not have legitimacy.
Right.
Albanian mayor selected with 50 votes in a majority Serbian part of the country after boycott, and then trying to have them installed by force. That's a given.
Yeah.
I mean, they will not lose anything, really. It's just a small part of the country. It has an important water reservoir. It touches on the mineral wealth, but I don't think it's going to be decisive on the main mineral wealth in Kosovo. They will, if they are compensated for this, they will gain a lot more because, Kosovo is outraged that the U.S. is coming and ordering them to form an association of Serbian municipalities in Kosovo. They say this is going to lead to secession, this will make our country unworkable, this is going to be a territorial solution. Like in Bosnia. At the same time, Kosovo President Vjosa Osmani was in Macedonia a few weeks ago, and she went to Tetovo and she organized a meeting of all, as she said, Albanian mayors or mayors of Albanian municipalities in Macedonia.
Yep.
So she was doing the same thing, promoting cooperation between municipalities which are majority Albanian in Macedonia, except in a much grander scale. It's much, much more territory, much more valuable territory. And they will not be, they might be even provoking this confrontation. They will lose the confrontation, they will lose this territory, but then they will say, okay, the next logical step is, if we're being consistent, is that we ask for the similar solution in Macedonia. We will absolutely have an association of Albanian municipalities in Macedonia as the next step. Some were talking in Macedonia that the next step of the solution would be like creating a two-chambered parliament, so then the upper chamber would represent regions, territories. This would be like more logical now, next step, an association of the Albanian mayors of the Albanian municipalities in Macedonia that will coordinate issues on healthcare, education, and then maybe they will say maybe preparedness to respond to firefighters and preparedness to respond to landslides and other disasters, and this will then be brought into like a territorial guard units of some kind, and then one thing leads to another. And what's worse now, at this point, Macedonians, I think, would actually welcome this situation because we have Albanian first deputy prime minister, or actual prime minister, as you said. Yeah. We have Albanian speaker of parliament. We have Albanian finance minister and minister in charge of public administration. These two put together mean public sector employment. We have Albanian foreign minister and deputy foreign minister negotiating on the Macedonian identity with Bulgaria. So all the key positions which Albanians could not dream of holding under Gruevski, they now hold and exert absolute power. Albania negotiates the Bechtel deal with the U.S. embassy. So yeah, I mean, I'm asking the question: why are the Americans supportive of the Albanians? But in this unprincipled, no questions asked way, but we have Philip Ricker now working for effectively an Albanian lobbying firm, Madeleine Albright, the Albright Group. We have the Albanian party in Macedonia giving to the American Bechtel company a highway contract of 1.3 billion, which will easily grow to 2.5 billion as it advances. So Albanians are currently bribing American diplomats in Macedonia with Macedonian public funds, who everybody contributes to. We're doing it to ourselves sometimes.
Well, maybe so the lesson then is Macedonians should be more corrupt than the Albanians in terms of the gifts that they give to the Americans, the American State Department. So Angela Aguilar, U.S. ambassador to Macedonia. I think that the Macedonia, since you talk about corruption all the time, but you like to talk, but there's nothing coming out of your mouth other than words. So maybe if the Macedonians are
name your price.
What's that?
Name your price.
Yeah, name your price. Exactly. What do you want, Angela? Can the Macedonians be more corrupt, and then you'll be a little more favorable towards them? So same thing with the Europeans. So David Greer.
We learned our lesson. We'll whatever it takes.
Oh dear. Oh, we're cynics. That's okay. So anyway.
No, but it's really an amazing story. I mean, okay, I understand that the U.S. put together like an infrastructure to bring down the Serbian government for good reason, not the Milosevic government, and this included cigarette smuggling from Montenegro. You had to fund the activities of everybody involved. This included paramilitaries. This included getting senators and congressmen to support this whole project. And you can't just, after the goal is accomplished in Serbia in 2000, with the fall of Milosevic, you can't just dismantle all this and tell, the Ucheka fighters, okay, now you go back to your fields, to your tomato patch, and be farmers again. You can't tell the lobbyists and the intelligence agents and everybody, okay, now you're no longer, supporting the Albanian cause against Serbia. Now we have to bring Serbia back from the cold. It takes time to demobilize this whole all these instruments which you put in place to bring down Milosevic, and Macedonia was the first collateral victim of these instruments. That once Milosevic was gone, they had nowhere to be pointed to, but the money was still flowing, the people were still in place, okay, what else are we going to do with all this infrastructure? And they turned to Macedonia. But at some point, it's been going on for so long, and it has the potential to cause so much damage in the region. So we have crazy situations. I was listening to Edward Joseph, who is the preeminent example of all this American interference agents, regime change, intelligence people, Albanian lobbyists, as we call them usually here, who says, turn to Greece, as a country. You need to have, you need to ally yourselves with Kosovo and with Greece, U.S. Macedonia, because these two countries are now afraid of border changes in the region, while other countries are not.
Right.
So Serbia is not afraid of border change. It can gain from all this. It already lost what it could realistically lose, maybe Sanjak, but then it can gain a lot in terms of Bosnia and Montenegro and Macedonia. Albania obviously is not afraid of border changes. It can gain Kosovo and half of Macedonia. Bulgaria is looking, maybe it can swoop in. He didn't mention Bulgaria, but it can swoop in on Macedonia.
Right.
But he says Kosovo is afraid to the extent that they have sovereignist politicians there, sovereignist powers, and who do not want to become second fiddle to Albania in Greater Albania. And Greece is afraid now that it has taken a lot of land from everybody in the region, from Bulgaria, Turkey, Macedonia, Albania. And if we have a new shuffling of the deck, Greece is afraid that it will be on the losing side. So you need to ally yourselves with these two countries because all hell can break loose from what, and he's very critical. He says what these people in the US diplomacy, he would point out initially to Escobar. Now they have patched things up, at least publicly, but obviously this deal is still being pushed to bring in Serbia on the western side and to give it North Kosovo. So, he says, so we have practically maybe two currents within the US foreign policy apparatus. One trying to, maybe like embodied in Chris Hill, trying to bring Serbia to the West and willing to make huge concessions to Serbia for the huge requests they have from Serbia. And the other, which wants to protect Kosovo, wants to fight Serbia to the end. Maybe, I'm not sure, when we're seeing the contours of a deal with Serbia shaping up, and at the same time, huge Western-supported protests in Belgrade. Right. So is this maybe Chris Hill trying to maintain pressure on Vučić while they're trying to make a deal? Vučić actually resigned from the position of party leader, trying to placate the protesters. So, he may be ousted while an attempt for a deal is made. So maybe it's a different current in the State Department, in the US diplomacy, trying to bring him down and stop this deal from happening, just like they charged Hashim Thaçi at the key moment when Trump was trying to make this deal. So, it's a two-tracked policy towards Serbia, I guess.
Yeah.
And it could be resolved at the moment while we're recording. Apparently, the Ukrainians are on the move, and it could all be resolved by the outcome, I guess, of this fight in Zaporozhye.
Yes.
Whichever side wins.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'm sure Serbia was going to make a move if Putin had entered Odessa last year, as he was hoping, without much problem. Then I'm pretty sure Serbia would have made some move with all these territories which I'm outlining, without talking to the Americans. Just it would be a game changer if the Russian army reaches Romania, the border with Romania had reached the border last year or reaches it in the near future. It would be a game changer if the Ukrainians actually win this fight. So.
I don't. On that note, and I know we're running long here, so we should probably wrap it up. I don't think that war is going to be ending anytime soon. So we can unfortunately yes. So anyway, all right. Well, let's call that a day, a podcast, an episode, and monitor it and see where in a couple of weeks we'll come back and sit down and see where we is, and go from there.
Yeah. If I'm not in a bomb shelter.
Nah, you won't be. You won't be. Come on, man. So. Yeah,
we will probably capitulate in the first 5 minutes. Whoever comes knocking on our door.
We'll see.
If it's the Albanians or the Serbs or the Bulgarians, we'll just roll over to wait.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Courage, man. Courage. So go have a drink. So it's you can there. I still haven't had breakfast here. It's still morning. So anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, that was a good wrap up. We solved nothing. We created more questions, I think, and we'll just have to wait and see. And
we wasted your time.
Hopefully not. So a different podcast. So. Sure. All right, man. Good talking to you.
Okay, buddy. You too. Take care.